pre-lunch session, you had two wonderful presentations. This is in some way or the other connected to where Professor Sandeep Shastri left. He kept talking about the research question. And you may be wondering what kind of a research question which I am going to make a presentation about. The topic has already been mentioned, that this is about how to study, why to study elections. So these are two questions which is merged into one. Why to study elections and how to study elections. So why is the first part, in which I am just trying to explain why we should study elections, and in the second part is connected to the overall theme of the workshop, which is about the method. If you want to study elections, is survey the only way to study elections, or there could be different methods to study elections? So first, why should we make an attempt to study elections, and then how should we study elections? Aage ja, please. So see, what happens is that we keep talking about elections, and whether elections take place in a developed countries or in an underdeveloped countries, there are always issues about elections, about neutrality of election. In some countries it is far more free and fair compared to some other countries. So there are different issues on which we can do studies on election, research on election. You might think, and I'm coming to some of those points, that what is all about doing election research on elections? And that is the common belief that, why do you study election? What is there to study elections? So the common misconception, what is the common misconception? And I'm consciously writing misconception, because we tend to believe that I know everything about election. I can tell you who is going to win from this constituency, what is going to happen, which party is likely to win, which candidate is popular. So there is nothing to do research on elections. Also, the other misconception, which Professor Shastri also mentioned in passing reference, that when I say, what do you do research on? When I say I do research on electoral politics, voting behavior, okay, you do exit polls. So exit polls, opinion polls have become synonym to doing research on elections, which is not the case. There are various questions within the broad theme of doing research on elections, which you could pick as your research question. Professor Shastri kept giving example of the leadership question. Does leadership matter in Indian elections? That could be one research question within doing research on elections. So the misconception is that why should you do research on elections? Because you know everything about election. And why do you want to do research on election when the Election Commission gives you the details of election results? But the Election Commission gives us details of election result, but not everything. There are many questions in our mind as a researcher which cannot be answered by Election Commission of India, results from Election Commission of India. And as I said, we can pick up, Professor Shastri mentioned one issue within the broad ambit of doing research on election, which is about, does leadership matter in election? There could be many such questions. So the point I'm trying to say is that the misconception is, I know everything about election, there's nothing to do research on election. And this is connected to research question. You have to think carefully. People come and say, what do you want to do research on? Election studies pe research karna. I want to do research on election studies. Election studies is a branch of study. It's not a research question. So one needs to think carefully about the research question. And I will give you some various examples. Say common belief, studying election means doing exit poll or at best opinion poll. These are the two words which is very common to when you say I'm doing research on elections. But in practice, studying election comprises a wide range of themes. It is too simplistic to say elections, doing research on election means doing exit poll and an opinion poll. I have given some examples of people who have not done opinion poll, not done exit poll ever in their life. But these are some of the important work which has been produced by some of the scholars. I have just mentioned a few, which is not related anywhere to opinion poll, exit polls. This is a work by Professor Mukulika Banerjee. She did this study in 2014 election, which is about why people vote. And there's a whole book on that. This is an ethnographic study on elections. So also, just to dispel the notion that election studies or doing research on election does not mean that everyone has to do opinion poll. One has to do a survey. This is an ethnographic based study which has been produced by Mukulika Banerjee. The other example is of Professor Ujjwal Singh, teaches political science, and Mukulika Banerjee is an anthropologist, studied elections. And the big question she wanted to answer, why do people vote? Why people vote? Ujjwal Singh, who teaches political science in Delhi University, did his research on functioning of Election Commission of India. How does Election Commission functions? What are the hurdles? I'm not posing the research question which he has posed in the book, but that's the larger theme on which he did the research. Freeness. So you could do research on elections looking at freeness and fairness of election. EVM is one thing which is being talked about. Are elections free and fair? This could be your research question. Do we think elections are free and fair in India? Are EVMs a useful instrument, tool for conducting elections? And I have just flagged off several other questions, and there could be many more questions of this kind which you can pick up as your research question to do elections. Just to read out some of those, what is the relationship between turnout and electoral outcome? When the turnout goes up, is it a sign of anti-incumbency, or is it a sign not of anti-incumbency, pro-incumbency? That could be one research question. Do men and women vote differently? Are women voting independently in Indian elections? Role of leadership, which Professor Sastry kept mentioning. Do parties have different support base among rural and urban India? What is the extent of impact of media on Indian elections? Because these days people keep talking about, oh, you can win elections by if you have influence on the media. If you have captured the media, means if you have undue influence on the media, you can win elections. So how much role does media play in Indian elections? How much impact media has on the voting behavior of the people, on your political orientation? These can all be one research question. Not all means not all in one research question, but these could be various research questions. And this is connected to my first big question. Why should we study elections? What is the need to study election if we know that Election Commission is going to give us the results? These are several kinds of anxieties as a researcher we may have, and that is why it is important to, or it is important to do research on elections as we do research on various other themes, whether it is about in psychology, history, sociology, political science, or in various other fields. So, first, why should we study elections? I have raised some of those questions, and now what I'm trying to do is to give you some examples. I'm going to show a lot of data, a lot of evidence, just to help you understand why do we want to study elections. First, the big question about elections, and Professor Sastry did mention about that, do people vote their caste or people cast their vote? So what is the relationship, or we can say, if I try to formulate that into a research question, do we see caste and politics, caste-based voting, do we see a convergence of caste-based voting now compared to the past? Or to put it simpler, in a simpler manner, are people voting more on the basis of caste now compared to what we saw in the 90s or a decade ago? So if that is the research question, and that many people have done research on such themes. So how do you get an answer to this? Election Commission result is not going to give you answer to these questions. How do you get the answer? You get the answer on this question and similar question of that kind from when you do research. So this is the OBC question. There is a lot of talk about OBCs. Should there be OBC census or not? Why should we have an OBC census in India? And there is a lot of talk Lot of writings in the newspaper, lot of discussion on the TV that BJP has made huge inroads among OBC. How do we know that? Does Election Commission gives us the number? We don't get numbers from Election Commission how different sections of people have voted. So we need to do research. We need to do research in order to understand what is the connection of caste and politics in India. Do really people vote on the basis of caste or not? So I'm flagging some examples. So this is, you can see from the data, this is the data from what was being mentioned by Professor Sandeep Sastry, NES, National Election Study. As a group in our institute, we have been doing research over a period of time. And this is the evidence to suggest that how BJP has been able to make inroads among the OBC voters. There was a time when the OBC vote was almost divided equally between BJP and Congress, almost 23, 24, 25%. And rest of the votes used to be polled by, rest support went to the regional party. You can think of many regional party in the southern states and in the North Indian state, say Bihar, UP, West Bengal. So a very large number of OBC voted for the regional party earlier, but now look at how the trends have changed, and we see BJP making huge inroads among the OBC voters. Yes, we can move. So there are few slides about how do we see upper caste votes. Back. Yes. So look at the polarization of upper caste vote. And what is the big point? The big point is that whether BJP has won or lost election. BJP lost 2004 and 2009 election, but still BJP had an upper hand among the upper caste voters. So if you look at the upper caste votes, they have always sided in much bigger numbers with the BJP compared to the Congress. And this is about the national picture. We could do the same thing about a state. You could do the same about one constituency. You could do same thing about a district. Depends upon your research question. If you have a research question about understanding the politics of Kerala, I have some slides for Kerala also at the end. So same kind of a research you could do for Kerala. So this is about the BJP's support base, and you can see the yellow bar, which is always above the blue bar, which is to say upper castes have always voted in much bigger numbers for the BJP, even if BJP has lost election. The Dalit vote. How BJP has been able to make huge inroads among the Dalit voters. There was a time when BJP used to get roughly 10-12% of the Dalit vote. So out of 100 Dalits, almost 10 to 12 Dalit used to vote for BJP since 1996 up till 2004. And then you see up till 2009, and you see the big change happening in 2014 and 2019, which is a huge jump and a decline for the Congress support base. Okay. How Muslims have voted, because, and why these questions are important, and that is why it is important to understand election. It is important to study elections. When BJP wins, sizable number of constituencies where Muslim voters are in sizable number, so we tend to conclude, we means without doing research, without doing proper research, with perception, we tend to conclude that, oh, BJP seems to have made inroads among the Muslim voters, and that is why BJP has been able to win 20 out of 40 Muslim constituencies where Muslims are in sizable number. But the data doesn't suggest that. It may be because of counter polarization, it may be because of several other factors, but not because BJP has been able to make inroads among the Muslim voters. When BJP did very well in UP Assembly election 2022, people started believing that, oh, Muslims have, at least there is a shift among the Muslim women towards the BJP, which is not the case. Look at the Muslim support for BJP, it is roughly 7-8% all the time. Whether BJP loses election, wins election, there is a decline for Muslim support for the Congress, and the regional parties have gained popularity among the Muslim voter. How do we come to these, how do we understand this phenomena of election? Only and only if we do research on election. And for that you have to pick up a relevant research question. Not necessarily everyone has to do religion by voting or caste by voting, but you can pick up one of these questions to do your own research. This is what Professor Sastry kept referring. Why do we ask questions, the kind of question which we have been asking in our surveys? Because these are the issues which are being debated, and working in a research institute, doing research on election, we believe that we need to give some answer to these questions. And what is this question all about? Because there is a lot of belief or shared belief that, Modi is Prime Minister Narendra Modi is an asset for BJP, and suppose the day Prime Minister Narendra Modi, thinks to relinquish the party's position, etc., then the BJP's vote share would go down. So the big question is, how big is Narendra Modi an asset for BJP? Is he really a vote puller for BJP? So we needed to answer this question. We designed the questionnaire in such a way that we should be able to ask this question, and based on the analysis we have been able to come up with this finding. And you can see on the left hand side, again left and right, Sandeep Shastri has already explained. If you see 32%, which is to say, of all the votes which BJP got in 2019 election, almost 1/3 of the vote of BJP was contributed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi's popularity. So this is an assessment. We keep guessing. If we don't do research on these, if we don't ask these questions in our research, in our survey, we would keep guessing. And some people might say, no, it's only 5%, less than 5%, because he or she may not like Prime Minister Modi. Someone else would say, oh, it's all about Prime Minister Modi, so all the votes BJP gets is about Prime Minister Modi. When we ask this question in a systematic manner, and this is all about how do you design the questionnaire in a neutral manner, we get an answer that this is roughly about 1/3 of the BJP vote is because of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's popularity. And just to cite another data from 2014 election, the same question which we asked in 2014, and as Professor Shastri has mentioned, we are definitely going to ask the same question in 2024. In 2014, it was roughly about 24%. It was 1/4, now it has gone up to 1/3. And this is the influence of Balakot. Many first year, second year students, I don't know whether have you heard about this or not. At the time of 2019 election, there was a Balakot incident when some places in Jammu and Kashmir were bombarded and many Indian soldiers lost their life. And then Indian government invaded through the air and bombarded many targets in Pakistan. So it just happened a month before election. And there was a lot of belief that if Balakot had not happened, then BJP may have lost election. That was a shared belief. So we also wanted to give an answer to, at least come to some kind of a answer to that question. And we see that there was an impact of Balakot, and you can see that all those people who had heard about the Balakot, Prime Minister Modi's popularity was much higher. Many more people wanted to see him as the Prime Minister, and among those voters who had not heard, which is the left-hand side, not heard about Balakot, among them Rahul Gandhi's popularity was higher. It was 27%, but among those who had heard about Balakot, what has happened in Balakot, about Indian government strike, Rahul Gandhi's popularity was only 8%. Prime Minister Modi's popularity gone up to 77 from 55%. Which is an indication, this is an evidence. What do we do in research? We collect evidence. So this is an evidence to suggest, yes, it actually benefited BJP, because among those who had heard about the Balakot strike, BJP's vote share went up because Prime Minister Modi's popularity went up. The media question, and then this is the last slide on why should we study election, because we have many questions in our mind, and then I will move on to the second section. Then how should we study elections? What is the method? Should we all do opinion poll? Should we do exit poll? Should we all do survey? And the immediate answer to that question is no, you don't need to do survey. If you want to do elections, it is what kind of questions you have, and your method would be guided by which method you want to select, would be guided by your research question. You can't blindly pick up one, ki if I have to do research on elections, then I have to do an opinion poll. No. You have to think carefully what is the research question which you want to address, and based on that you have to pick up one of the various research themes, various research tools. So this is the last one about the media, and we tried to figure out how much does media help BJP, because there is a lot of belief that BJP is winning because of money, power, and because of its influence on media. We get a sense, yes, there is a relationship, and this is the advantage BJP over Congress among different kinds of voters. And what are these different kinds of voters? So first, those who watch TV regularly and those who never watch TV. And you look at the initial ones. So the lead of BJP over Congress is much among those who watch TV regularly. Read newspaper regularly, never read newspaper. You see the lead of BJP over Congress is much higher, 20%, 4% if you look at May 2014. This is 2014 Lok Sabha elections. And if you see, use internet regularly, if you are on social media, internet. Again, if you look at May 2014 and May 2019, so the lead of BJP over the Congress, which is to say, if you are more exposed to media, your political orientation is getting shaped more towards BJP, slightly less towards the Congress. And among the Congress, if you are less on social media, less on the media exposure, then you may be slightly tilted towards Congress. So this is another example of how much does media influence political behavior. So now I'm moving on to the question of then how should we study elections? What is the method? Broadly, we divide two kinds of method, quantitative and qualitative method. Which method should be applied? And in qualitative method, ethnography, case study. I gave an example of ethnography study by Mukulika Banerjee. Election study, you can use an ethnography method to study election. You could also use a quantitative method. And this is quantitative method is all about doing survey. You go to the field, develop a questionnaire, do a random sample, interview large number of voters, and then with a large number of voters, we can do the kind of analysis which I have showed for the various questions in the previous slides. Quickly go. Qualitative research. What is the advantage and what is the limitation? So in a qualitative research, the advantage is that you can ask questions of various why this is happening. You will be able to answer many questions about why this is happening, why women are turning out in much bigger numbers now compared to the past. This is what has happened in Indian elections. Women are voting in much bigger numbers. In quantitative research, you won't be able to answer that question. So qualitative research helps you going deep into your research subject. You can do a constituency level study. If you want to study one constituency, if you want to study the rallies, so you can use one of the qualitative methods, and it would be helpful in answering many whys, why this is happening. So don't misunderstand that if you want to do research on elections, you have to do quantitative method. You could use a qualitative method, and I gave an example that there are people who don't use quantitative method, while we at CSDS Lokniti have been using quantitative method for lots of our research, but that's not the only method of doing research on elections. You could use one of the qualitative method if you want to study a constituency, if you want to follow a leader, if you want to look at even the question of leadership. Not necessarily you have to do a survey. So that's qualitative research. This is advantage and disadvantage about qualitative research. Quantitative research. See, no method is foolproof. There is no hierarchy about method. Don't think that the first slide was on qualitative method, which means qualitative method must be better than quantitative method. There is no hierarchy about the method, but it's about two different tools, two different techniques, and one has to be very, very careful about which technique to be applied. All the tools are available to us, and not only in research, it is available in various spheres of our own life. Suppose if I think of an example, cutting. There are different tools to cut things. Nail cutter is there, knife is there, axe is there, sword is there, and there you could think of few others. All these are tools meant for cutting. Now, which one you want to pick up today evening when you go home? You have to be very, very careful, and you are very careful about that, but not for research. Which tool we should select? If we have to cut our nails, we can't pick up the knife. And if you do that, if you try doing that, tomorrow maybe you may be sitting in the room with a bandage on your nails, on your hand, because you did not pick up the right tool. The nail cutter would have been a more appropriate tool. It's not about right and wrong, it's about appropriate and non-appropriate. If you want to cut a tree, you should not be using a small knife. You will spend all your life trying to cut a big tree, an old one, using a knife. You will not be able to do that. If you have to cut vegetables and the fruits, you have to pick up a right tool. So similarly, even for research, whether it is on elections or any other topic, you have to be very, very careful. Every step is important. Professor Sastry did mention, it's a marathon. Don't think Professor Sastry has mentioned research question ho gaya, then all over. No, it's not over. Because after Professor Sastry, it's me who have to tell you that once you have crossed that hurdle of thinking of a research question, it is a relay race. You can't keep your baton aside and think, ho gaya, I have won the race. You have not won the race. You have to, move ahead. And this is about, you have to think once you have thought about your research question, you have to think carefully about your research tool. And the first distinction is whether you want to pick up a quantitative method or a qualitative method. Okay. So in a quantitative method, when should we apply a quantitative method? General principle. What is the general principle? If your area of research is very large, both in numbers and geographically large, and if it is diverse, then it is better to pick up a quantitative method of research rather than a qualitative method of research. That's the basic prescription, that if your area of research is very large, both geographically, numerically, and if it is diverse, then you should try and think of picking up a quantitative method, which is to do a survey in order to gather people's opinion, rather than going for one case study of one village, one district, or one city. But does quantitative method does not have any limitation? It also has limitation, because quantitative method will help you in understanding what proportion of women are turning out to vote, what proportion of respondents want Narendra Modi to see as the next Prime Minister, what proportion of voters are happy with the work of the Delhi government, what proportion of voters are happy with the work done by the Kerala government. But why? Why cannot be answered by using a quantitative method? And remember, quantitative method is always about large number. You are collecting data in large number. The word is self-explanatory. Quantitative method. You have to have a large number. How large? I will come to that. And remember, it's not only about large number, it is about picking up your right sample. When you're doing the survey, how do you pick up your right sample? Random sample, if you do a systematic random sample, you are more or less sure that you will be picking up the right sample. And I will show you some examples. When we picked up the sample using systematic random sample, what kind of results did we get? And what is the sample we got? Even for election study, if we want to do research on quantitative method, so people ask, what kind of a research should I do? When should I do survey? When should you do survey? It depends upon what do you want to study. And these are different kinds of surveys which I have mentioned, or timing and what kind of survey you can do. Suppose pre-election, you want to understand right away. Kerala election, the Lok Sabha election takes place next year, but you want to understand what are the, support base of parties at this moment. So this is a pre-election survey. So you will do a survey maybe 6 months before election. A nomination process. Sometimes political parties get survey done to think of who is popular and who is not popular. So then you do the survey just a month before election for people to understand who is a popular candidate in the constituency. Then we have campaigning. If you want to understand the campaign, does campaign make a difference on political choices? Then when do you want to do the survey? You do want to do the study when the campaign is on, and then voting and after voting. Exit polls are example of the study which is done on the election day, which is not properly a research, but one kind of a research if we want to fit into that category. And then these are post-poll surveys. Which method is better? As I said, no hierarchy of method. As I said, which tool is better for cutting depends upon what do you want to do. So which method is better? You have to think carefully. This is my research question. Will I be able to answer my research question using this method or that method? Right or wrong, I don't want to put all the methods into two boxes, right or wrong, but the boxes could be labeled as more appropriate, less appropriate. Quantitative method of research on elections. If you replace election, you could put anything. Social behavior, anything, but these are the basic things to be followed when you are trying to do a quantitative method. Sampling must be done scientifically. Questionnaire must be designed in an unbiased manner. Field investigators must be imparted some training. Data collection must be done in a neutral manner, and analysis without any bias. You should not pick up things which you like and leave things which you don't like. Like or dislike means from the findings. So one has to do the analysis also in a neutral manner. Sample is very important. Sample and sampling is very important in a quantitative method. And as I said, quantitative means you have to have a large number. Quantitative research. So the question is, are bigger sample necessarily better? How big sample you should take? So are bigger sample necessarily better sample? And my answer is no. Not necessarily. Bigger samples are not necessarily better samples. And I will show you some example to suggest, even if your sample is small, but if the sample has been selected properly, you could come to the conclusion from your research. I will show you examples from the election research, because you can easily match. If you have done a research at the time of election, you could match the findings based on finally the vote share, the seats, etc. So now I'm using the two sample size, and these are all real surveys. This is one survey by a company called Axis My India, a very big company, very successful these days about making predictions about seats, which party is likely to win how many seats. So their sample in Punjab was 45,000 and our sample in Punjab was 4,668. This is what they predicted, and this was the actual survey, actual results. The last column is about the actual results. Do you see much variations? Was a sample of 46,000 much better compared to 4,600 in predicting the vote share accurately? No, not at all. Move. And this is not only about one election. That is why I have several slides to show. This is about UP Assembly election. Axis My India 1.25 lakhs. And our sample was 7,265. They predicted 46% vote share for BJP. We predicted 43. They were much better. Samajwadi Party for 36, 35, 36, 3, 3, 2, 12. Again, this is 3%, not 35. This is 3%. Move on. Goa. Axis My India sample 10,000. These are all recent surveys. 10,000. Lokniti sample 2,066. And look at the predictions. Look at Revolutionary Goans, the new party. They had predicted 23% vote. We predicted 8%. And they got 10%. So the point I'm trying to say is that don't think that bigger samples are necessarily better samples. Move on. Uttarakhand. Our sample 2,738. And Access My India sample, 26,000. And I'm using these tables with their permission. They know it fully well that I'm using it for, giving an example of big sample and small sample. This is not to criticize their sample. They are much better in different aspects. They are much better in predicting the number of seats. But Karnataka, again you can see no difference. So it's not one-off. It's not one chance that we got a accurate result based on a small sample. Karnataka, this is Kerala now. 2021, I have not been able to compare with them because that time they were not doing the survey. But just to stress the point, sample size 3,424. Did we get it right? Yes, we got it right in terms of vote estimates. And what is vote estimate? This is the political preference of the people, and we are matching it with finally how people voted. Kerala 2016, sample size 1725, 1,725. Did we get it wrong? Absolutely accurate. Again. Now, moving on to the last 2-3 slides. I said we are not comparing with, I'm just trying to give you an example of big samples and the small samples. You might think, oh, it is so easy to, get accurate results. It is easy if you follow the method. If you don't follow the method, it's not easy. It's not CSDS which is getting these results. It's not Sandeep Shastri, me and my colleague. It is the method which brings us closer to the reality. If you follow the method, if you have a good research question, if you have an appropriate research question, if you select the appropriate research tool, and within the research tool, if you pick up the right research techniques, you are bound to get results which will be closer to the reality. Closer to the reality. We don't know that this is the reality, so we come closer to the reality. But remember, since I was comparing it with Access My India, they still had the advantage of getting numbers right. When I am saying numbers, it is about seats. Which party is going to win how many seats? We try and keep ourselves away from that business because these are small numbers, and we think it is tricky because if you want to do research to predict numbers, then you need to take a much bigger sample because then you need to go to each and every constituency what they do. 1,25,000 in UP. They actually went to each and every constituencies of 403 constituency. We went to a selected sample, and that's the beauty of sampling. So the final part of election research, because whenever you say you're doing research on elections, people ask this question, but what is the utility of all these research if you're not telling us which party is going to win how many seats? We keep saying that this is election research is not about seats, but let me give you some idea why forecasting seat becomes so tricky in India, in Indian electoral system. Why it is so tricky? Because it is tricky because with the same votes, parties get different kinds of seats because it is our electoral system is first past the post system. You can top the class by defeating your number 2 by one number. You could be a topper leaving behind the second one with 10% marks. That happens in elections also. So if there are close election seats won by political party or parties getting defeated by small margins, then it becomes very tricky. So some examples of that, and then I will end. So glimpses from UP. Why it is so tricky? Look at 2012. Samajwadi Party, SP Samajwadi Party, they got 29% vote and they ended up winning 224 seats. And now, look at various examples. Look at 1996. BJP got 33% vote. So BJP is getting more votes, ended up with 160 seats. This is 1996 assembly election. So with 33% votes, party gets 160 seats. Same state, same electoral system, everything remains the same. And Samajwadi Party gets 4% less votes. And they ends up with 224 seats. This is not the only example. Lok Sabha elections, 2014 Lok Sabha election. BSP, Bahujan Samajwadi Party, this is an example from UP, they got 19% votes, 19.6. almost 1 in every 5 voters voted for BSP. They ended up with no seats, 0 seats with 20% votes. So what happens is that, you know, if a party is getting 20% vote, in a normal situation, you would expect the party to win some seats, 5, 7. Move on. This is the Lok Sabha elections. Look at 2009 Lok Sabha elections. BJP has 18.6% vote. How many seats did they win in that Lok Sabha election? 116. So BJP with 18.6% votes gets 116 seats, but Congress in the next election 2014 with 19.6% vote, 1% higher, ends up with 44 seats. How? So if both of, which is to say, if the two drivers are driving the car at same speed, more or less on the same road, you would expect both of them to reach the destination more or less on same time, 5 minutes here and there. Not like this. With 18.6% vote, you get 116 seats. And then other driver driving at a much faster pace ends up lagging behind with such a huge margin. Only 44 seats. Karnataka. This is a strange example. Party, Congress always gets more votes, less seats. Congress in 2008, 35% votes and 80 seats. BJP, 34% votes and 110 seats. 2018 Assembly election, Congress 38% votes, ends with 78 seats, and BJP with 36.2% votes ends up with 101 seats. So various strange examples of vote seat difference. So I'm through with my presentation. So in any survey research, it is more the question of getting a representative sample, and don't think that you have to have a very big sample. If you get a representative sample, and how do you get a representative sample? If you apply the tool properly, if you apply a appropriate sampling tool, which is a systematic random sample, there could be 2-3 lectures on sampling, detailed lectures, how do you sample, but just to give you a quick example of, we used systematic random sample, and look at how representative we get the sample quickly. This is the profile of 2000 sample in Goa. And we have matched it with, this is the survey data. How much? So female Goa 49% in the entire Goa. In our sample it was 52%. Urban we got it very suppressed. But look at other. Aage jao. Punjab, sample of 4,600. In female, all over Punjab, 47%. In our sample also, 47%. We did not pick up like this. Randomly, it's random selection. And you can see, more or less, Dalits 31%, we also got 33%. Hindus 38%, we got 50%. Sikh 58%, we got in our sample 65%. UP, more or less, these are more or less representative. It's not that, a population has 10%, but in our sample it's 40% or something like that. Uttarakhand, sample of 2,600, female 49% in the population. In our survey, we got 49%. Urban 30%, we got 34%. Dalits, Muslims, etc. I think Kerala hoga last, and then we will end. Karnataka sample 1650, and look at how representative it was. 49%, 49%, 39, 41, 17% Dalits, we got 17%. Adivasis, we were overrepresented, and Muslims, more or less the same. And look at the sample size, 1650. And this is the last one, Kerala sample for 2021 survey, 3,424. And this was also more or less representative. So this is all about using quantitative method of research or qualitative method of research. And if you follow the right method, I think there is a lot of guarantee that whether you are doing research on elections or any other topic, I just picked up the example of elections because I may be in a position to communicate better and give you some evidence that how it works. I think I'm done. Thank you very much.
Sir, it was very interesting presentation. I have few questions. One is related to the concept called social engineering. There are a lot of talks about how BJP is managing to do social engineering. And in fact, you have written an article recently in Indian Express in explained section, October 7th, OBC vote, caste survey, and in which you have mentioned that if you consider 2023 data, the OBC support base among BJP voters have risen, right? So how, I mean, my question is related to social engineering. How does BJP manage to conduct this so-called social engineering? And we have a lot of information about how within caste, within OBCs, lower OBCs, you yourself have mentioned about categorized OBCs into lower OBCs and upper OBCs. How things are done and what was the situation in the past? Whether, for example, during Indira Gandhi or other popular prime minister's time, they have also used the same tactics or something similar could be found in the past. So next question is related to whether... There was already 3 questions. See, next is related to election studies and its effect on the results. Matlab, how our basic study, itself could turn into effect or impact upon the results. So, for example, you are saying 72% of OBCs are in favor of BJP, and how total? Get some wrong data, 72%. Okay. Ask your question. Okay. So, I mean, how come this thing? The advantage is that I have already forgotten his first 3 questions. Okay. Okay, this is the thing. The third question.
Again, this is the first one.
This is the second. I mean, I think you can answer it, then I'll ask.
No, couple of things. First, so where do I start? Which is the first one? Social engineering is saying, how does BJP do social engineering? This is not about, this doesn't come out from research, how does BJP do social engineering. But if you look at the pattern of ticket distribution and how they form the alliances, you will get some idea that why BJP forms alliances with smaller regional parties in different states. This is all about social engineering. How do you try and bring voters of different castes together in your favor? So if you form an alliance with Apna Dal and Lok Jan Shakti Party, Apna Dal is a small party in UP, Lok Jan Shakti Party is a small party in Bihar, and several other smaller parties. This is the idea of social engineering. Forming an alliance with smaller parties, and these are the parties which are caste-based party. These are the parties which have strong support based among particular caste. And these castes are not likely to vote for BJP in a big number, so they form alliance. And this is how they enter into this whole thing of social engineering. Now his question, he is referring to some of my articles, and he's actually having that article in his hand. So, can I compare the data from what was happening during Indira Gandhi's time? The problem is that there was no proper research done at the time. I don't have any evidence, so I won't be able to say anything on that. And that is the beauty of, it is like rice. We are in Kerala, so rice is a good example. Rice, the importance of rice, as it becomes older and older, it is more precious. When we go to the shop, we ask for an old rice. Purana chawal chahiye, because it is very good. The data also has the similar value. If you want to do a survey for what happened in 1998 elections, you can't do the survey now to figure out what was the issue in 1998. But if somebody has done the survey, so it becomes, as the data becomes old, it has more value. So there is no data available for, that time, 90 Indira Gandhi's time. So we are not in a position to compare with that. Or there was any other question? Acha, why do we take, so this is the question, why did we take 3,500 in Kerala in 2021 and 1,650 in the previous election? It's all about budgeting. It's not only budgeting. First, you have to think of what do you want to do with the research. And I will give you an example, and you probably might get an answer to that. So if you are celebrating your birthday, and you know that only four of your friends are going to come, if you order a cake of half a kg, it should be okay. If you know that 10 people are going to come for your birthday, you can order a cake of 1 kg, should be sufficient. But if you know that 200 people are going to come, and you have to have 200 slices of the cake, what would happen if you have only 1 kg cake in your house? Everybody will get chutney of the cake. This much of cake, and you have to make 200 slices of that. So you knew well in advance that you are going to have 200 friends in the house, 200 guests. So you had ordered a much bigger cake, 10 kg cake, so that you can make 200 slices, meaningful slices. That is what we also do. Kerala, we all know three or four divisions of Kerala, Malabar, 2 other regions, Travancore, etc. So if I know that I need to do the analysis of Kerala voting behavior in terms of 4 regions, I have to have a slightly bigger sample. If I have a small sample, I won't be able to divide it into 4 or 5 blocks. That is the prime consideration. That's the prime consideration. There are other considerations also, like if you have 200 people and you want to order a cake of 15 kg, you don't have the money for that. You have to compromise. Either you have to tell half of your friends, I'm not celebrating my birthday. Or you have to do something. So that compromises we also have to do in our research. If we don't have that much of resources, then we have to forget about doing detailed analysis, only the Kerala-based analysis. And we can do with small sample. Even 1,000 samples should be all right. You saw the slide, 1,650 was good enough a sample to give us a representation of Kerala. But if I want to divide it into 5 parts, then it becomes very small. And then similarly, 1 kg cake being cut into 20 pieces makes no sense. Does someone have a birthday today? Planning to have a cake?
Sir, my question is, how has the role of social media and digital platforms evolved in shaping the election outcomes in India? And one more question, what are the implications for the future democracy in India?
Future of democracy in India. Your sir has to have a full-length seminar on that. 2 days seminar on future of democracy in India. On the first question, I will pose a question and then give you an answer, or maybe you give the answer. Which is to say, suppose there was no media, hypothetically, from today, the media is completely banned. So you can't read newspaper, you can't watch television, everything has been all these things have been blacked out. Does that mean BJP will lose election? Going by the evidence. Does that mean that if there is no media in this country, BJP will lose election? Because many people tend to believe, hypothesis is that BJP is winning election only and only because of the media. That's a hypothesis. People tend to believe. So do you believe that if the media is stopped, complete ban, nothing, no media, and think of the slide which I showed, will BJP lose election? BJP might do slightly less, or the performance will go down slightly, but BJP will not lose election. Why do I say that? Look at the data. BJP was leading over Congress among all kinds of voters, whether they were watching TV or not watching TV, whether they were exposed to social media or not exposed to social media, whether they were reading newspaper or not reading newspaper. So even if there is no media, BJP had led over Congress even among those voters. At least that evidence gives us confidence to see, at least gives me confidence to say, yes, BJP's support base would go down slightly, but BJP is not losing election. Which is to say, it's not, BJP is not winning election only because of media.
Thank you, sir.